James, the CEO wants to talk to you, and Michael is with him too. It seems you're finally being let go. I guess I'm just an unlucky guy. As I headed to the CEO's office, through the elevator and the hallway, I was engulfed in gloom. When I entered the CEO's office, just as my subordinate had said, Mr. Smith and department head Michael were there. "You don't fit in our company, you're fired." Hearing this sudden dismissal from Mr. Smith, Michael, sitting beside me, raised the corners of his mouth, bursting into a smile of joy. But then, are you perhaps misunderstanding something? The true nature of this dismissal that he revealed next was shockingly unexpected. I am James. This year, I turned 37, just an ordinary company employee. I now live in a corner of New York, originally from a rural area in Idaho. Maybe it's because I was nurtured in a generous and leisurely countryside environment. Though it's a bit odd to say about myself, I've never been able to become as cool and detached as city folks, always siding with those in trouble or in a weaker position, a man of deep compassion. I went to school in rural Idaho until high school and then attended a mid-tier private university in New York. During my college years, I worked various part-time jobs and eventually got a job at an IT company, T-Tech, which at the time was barely more than a startup. Before I knew it, 15 years had passed as I struggled and worked at this company, and I've reached this age. The company, which was small when I joined, has grown into a mid-sized IT trading company. As a mid-level manager and the head of the system development section at our New York headquarters, my work environment is far from ideal, to say the least. Being a head in name only, I'm constantly caught between the demands of my superiors and the needs of my subordinates. A classic example of being stuck between a rock and a hard place. Especially among my subordinates, many are from prestigious universities, making them generally difficult to handle. Among them, some subordinates have very high self-esteem and self-confidence, and they are very assertive. Therefore, as a mediocre supervisor with a significantly lower educational background than theirs, I often sense their defiance and mockery towards my instructions, even if they don't express it openly. In other words, they look down on me as their head. Moreover, my direct superior, the head of the system development section, Michael, is a typical opportunist who climbed the career ladder just by being savvy. Michael tends to delegate tall, important, or complex tasks to his subordinates, leaving everything to others while he takes all the credit for himself. A deceitful superior who only wants to reap the benefits without putting in the work. These troublesome subordinates and superiors are mostly from the prestigious private university, K University, forming an unbearable internal university clique. Michael often says to me, "James, your alma mater and university is like the typical fallback university for us K University graduates, isn't it? It's sad. You must be harboring such a complex, it's scary." Michael would say this out loud, ensuring I hear it, and then the subordinates from K University would laugh mockingly at me, even though it wasn't funny at all. Indeed, in university, my alma mater is not highly ranked and is considered a safety school for students aiming for prestigious universities like K University. I, too, had applied to prestigious universities but ended up at N University as my safety option, so Michael's sarcastic comments often struck a chord with me. In this hostile office environment, my oasis was Elizabeth, who recently started working as a cleaner in our office. Elizabeth, not yet accustomed to her job, often made mistakes and seemed lost on the floor, which led to some mean-spirited younger employees clicking their tongues or harassing her openly. However, as I mentioned earlier, being raised in the countryside has instilled in me a nature that can't ignore those in vulnerable positions. Gradually, I found myself discreetly helping Elizabeth when she seemed to be struggling with her cleaning tasks, and started to strike up friendly conversations with her. Elizabeth wore a large cleaner's hat pulled down over her eyes and a big mask, making it hard to see her face, but she seemed to be quite elderly. She warmed up to me as I helped her out and started making small talk, sharing stories from her life that were both interesting and insightful. Indeed, the stories from Elizabeth, who has lived through many years and is a senior in life, were interesting and full of wisdom. In the midst of the hostile work environment that left me feeling on edge, the casual chats with Elizabeth gradually became an irreplaceable form of relaxation for me. However, my subordinates in the system development section, especially those in the K University clique led by Michael, openly mocked us. Seeing me, with my lower education, happily chatting with the cleaner Elizabeth, they would say loudly enough for us to hear. Low-educated old man and an old lady, perfect match at the bottom. On one such day, after working late at the office and feeling completely drained, I finally made it to the nearest station to my company. As I passed through the ticket gate and was descending the stairs to the platform, a wallet flew out of the bag of an elderly woman walking slightly ahead of me and fell to the ground. However, the elderly lady didn't notice and continued to hurry towards the platform. I immediately made my way through the crowd, picked up the fallen wallet, looked up, and frantically searched for her. To my relief, I found her already lined up at the boarding area of the platform. It was a platform for a train heading in the opposite direction to mine. I need to get this wallet back to that elderly lady quickly. In the midst of the rush hour crowd, I hurried down the stairs to the platform as fast as I could, but unfortunately, the train was already pulling in. The train doors opened all at once, and the elderly lady boarded. No choice, it's going the opposite way, but I'll have to get on that train. Desperate, I raced down the stairs and barely managed to slip through the doors just as they were closing, boarding the train heading in the opposite direction to my home. Once on, I found the train packed to the brim with commuters. I had seen the elderly lady with the lost wallet board the next car over. I have to get this wallet to her before she gets off. While receiving some annoyed looks and tuts from other passengers, I apologized profusely and slowly made my way through the crowded car towards the next one. By the time I reached the elderly lady's car, 2 stations had passed. As I quickly explained how I found her wallet and came to return it, the elderly lady looked incredibly surprised. Though she appeared quite elderly, she seemed energetic and had a kind, refined face. What struck me was how her eyes widened in shock the moment she saw me. "You are such a kind person, to go out of your way to return a lost wallet by boarding a train going in the opposite direction of your home." The elderly lady was so moved, thanking me repeatedly, that I became embarrassed and modestly replied, "Oh, it was nothing. Just doing what anyone would." Just then, as the train was stopping at the second station, I said, "Well, this is my stop," and bid the elderly lady goodbye before hopping off the train. Having taken the train in the wrong direction, I decided to wait on the opposite platform for a train going back the way I came. That's when something strange occurred to me. How did that elderly lady know I took the train in the opposite direction? Despite not having mentioned anything about myself, the elderly lady somehow knew I had taken the train in the opposite direction to return her wallet. Life is full of mysteries. With a puzzled shake of my head, I boarded the train home. The next day, as I arrived at work as usual, my colleague Brian rushed over to my desk. "James, thank you so much. The proposal you advised me on last week, I presented it as you instructed, and we got the contract. And this morning, Mr. Smith personally called me in to commend me for it, all thanks to you." Honestly, I had always thought Brian was one of those who looked down on me with a bad attitude, so his sudden change took me by surprise. I had advised Brian on numerous occasions, and this wasn't the first time a deal had gone through, but it was the first time he had expressed gratitude and thanked me like this. Was being praised by Mr. Smith personally really such a game changer? Sensing my skepticism, Brian added, "Yeah, James, The reason I came to thank you is that he told me to. He said, this successful deal is thanks to James, a competent and exemplary supervisor. Make sure you thank him properly. Watching Brian walk away, I muttered to myself, why would he? That day was just the beginning, and from the next day on, the atmosphere around me at work began to change significantly. Without altering my work style or approach from the previous week, good news and results started coming my way one after another. Specifically, one of our long-standing clients approached us with a proposal to embark on a major project together. And, to my surprise, they nominated me as the person in charge from our company. Having worked here for about 15 years, this was the first time I had been specifically requested for a project. In the past, even if I did high-quality work, someone else always seemed to take the credit or obstruct my efforts. It felt like I had gone from being a symbol of misfortune to someone basking in the limelight. I asked Jessica, the client's representative, why she chose me as the contact person for our company, despite there being other employees available. Jessica replied, it was because Mr. Smith recommended you. He assured us that if it's James from the System Development Department, there can be no mistake. We took the liberty of looking into your past achievements and, true to his word, found you to be an exceptionally capable individual. I was taken aback to hear once again that he had played a role in this. And so, my once luckless corporate life seemed to be taking a turn for the better recently, lifting my spirits and making me grin to myself. Being appointed as the person in charge of an unprecedentedly large project from a client filled me with enthusiasm, and I dived into the preparations. This project was undoubtedly the biggest opportunity in my career, and its success would significantly enhance my reputation. I was brimming with motivation. Day after day, I stayed late at the office, fully focused on preparing for this project. Creating specifications for the newly developed program, drafting various explanatory documents, preparing for presentations. I was giving it my all, drawing on every bit of strength I had. After a month of such dizzyingly busy yet fulfilling days, the final presentation, where I would meet all the clients, was just 2 days away. After tirelessly working through sleepless nights, I managed to complete the new system and nearly finished the specification documents and the extensive materials for business negotiations by yesterday. On the day before the presentation, I arrived at work, trying to contain my excitement, and launched the newly completed system for a trial run. Then, I tried to open the specification document files stored on my PC, along with other files for the business negotiation presentation. But they were gone. All the files had been deleted. Moreover, all the backup files I had made as a precaution were also erased. Even more, all the documents I had printed out and piled up next to my PC just the day before had vanished without a trace. This can't be happening. What on earth is going on? I felt a chill run down my spine and couldn't help but shout out loud. In a panic, I searched under my desk and in my drawers, desperately looking for the stacks of documents, but they were nowhere to be found. As I was doing this, drawn by my earlier shout, some people came over, laughing uproariously. When I turned towards the source of the crude laughter, there were Michael and his entourage, looking down on me with scorn. Too bad. All those documents you worked so hard on and the files on your PC, this guy threw them all away. Michael, seemingly finding the situation hilarious, intimately burst into laughter, pointing at David, a junior employee. David was a newcomer, but like Michael, he was from K University and had a nasty personality, acting like Michael's lackey. I thought your files and documents were garbage just like you, so I deleted all the files along with the backups, and threw all the paper stacks into the shredder bin. As David made his flippant remark, Michael and the rest of the group burst into uncontrollable laughter. Haha, it's hilarious, right? Threw them all away. Haha, now James can't do his presentation. Bye-bye, business deal. Oh dear, Such a big project gone to waste. What a pity, poor thing. Michael and his cronies mocked and tormented me, making a laughing stock out of me. Glaring at Michael and David, who had deleted the files, I said, "Do you have any idea what you're doing? Aren't you ashamed of yourselves for stooping to such despicable actions?" To which David brazenly replied, "Not at all. We have to nip in the bud any bad influence from our incompetent senior, or it's us, the juniors, who end up getting crushed." Haha, getting told off by the newbie. James, you've been getting a bit too cocky lately because you've been recognized a bit. You were an eyesore, so we just gave you a reality check. Go ahead and embarrass yourself in the business meeting and revert back to your mediocre self. And don't you dare get ahead of yourself ever again. Michael, seizing the moment, vented his true feelings. Hearing Michael's appalling words, I realized everything. Michael, the department head of system development, was deeply resentful that I, a mere supervisor, had been appointed by the client for a big project, bypassing him. I felt his actions were clearly driven by ugly jealousy towards me. Stunned by their actions and responses, I was left speechless as Michael, with a parting shot of "Let this be a lesson. Never overstep again, you worthless supervisor," walked away with his entourage from my desk. As I watched their retreating figures with a sense of despair, I muttered to myself, all the backup files were deleted, and all the documents were thrown away. I could start over from scratch, but there's absolutely no way I can finish before the day after tomorrow's business meeting. It's all over. How could I have been so careless? I blamed myself for leaving my PC unlocked and for carelessly leaving the documents by my desk, feeling a sense of futility in hindsight. The next day, I went to work feeling utterly despondent. With the business meeting now seemingly doomed, my spirit hit rock bottom, and I was overwhelmed with depression, barely able to stand. Unable to focus on work, I went to the break room alone, repeatedly sighing and holding my head in my hands. Embarrassingly, I felt a lump in my throat from my own inadequacy. Then, someone patted my shoulder. Looking up, I saw Elizabeth, the cleaner, looking at me with concern. Elizabeth, sorry, I'm not really in the mood for small talk right now." As I said this, Elizabeth smiled kindly with just her eyes showing, then presented something she had been hiding behind her back. To my astonishment, it was the stack of documents I had printed out, which were supposed to have been thrown away by David. The specification documents for the new system, the materials for the presentation, and all the documents for the business negotiations were all there, intact. "What, Elizabeth, where did you find these?" Surprised, I asked, and Elizabeth replied, "The day before yesterday, when I was collecting trash, I found a large stack of documents in the bin for shredding, which isn't usually there. It seemed odd, so I checked and saw they were the documents you'd been working so hard on every day. I thought to myself that I couldn't let such important things be shredded, so I collected and saved them all right there." At that moment, Elizabeth appeared to me like a saint. "Elizabeth, thank you so much. With these, I can go ahead with tomorrow's presentation and negotiation. You saved me at the last minute. You're my savior, Elizabeth. Thank you." Overwhelmed with gratitude, I couldn't help but rejoice, and Elizabeth watched me with a pleased expression, nodding repeatedly as she spoke. "What goes around comes around. You're my savior, after all." Faced with Elizabeth's cryptic remark, I looked at her in bewilderment, only to see her chuckle amusingly in response. The following day, I was able to attend a presentation for the big project we were working on with our client, and thanks to the documents, I managed to conduct a successful presentation. The subsequent negotiations also ended in great success, leading to contracts with several major client companies. It turned out to be one of the largest deals in the history of my company, T-Tech. Elizabeth, thank you. The negotiations were a huge success thanks to you. I wanted to share this great success with Elizabeth, who had saved the documents, before anyone else. When I happily arrived at work the next day, I was greeted by David, one of Michael's spiteful followers. David said to me with a sneer, "James, Mr. Smith wants to talk to you, and Michael is joining him. It seems, James, you are finally being let go." Still buzzing from the success of yesterday's negotiations, David's words felt like a cold shower. Just when I thought I was finally in a position to shine, my joy was short-lived, and now I was being fired. David mentioned that Michael was also in the CEO's office. Probably, Michael had framed the deletion of my files as a result of my mishandling. That must have led to discussions of my dismissal due to a supposed lack of confidentiality management skills. I guess I'm just an unlucky guy. With a heavy heart, I made my way to the CEO's office, pondering over these thoughts in the elevator and the hallway. I knocked and entered the CEO's office. Upon entering, just as David had said, Mr. Smith and Michael were there. "Ah, James, you've come. Take a seat." Mr. Smith gestured for me to sit. Then, unexpectedly, he said, "You're not suited for our company. You're fired." I thought to myself in shock, "This is so sudden," and screamed internally. Hearing Mr. Smith's abrupt announcement, Michael, sitting next to me, grinned with joy. Although I was prepared for the worst, the injustice of it all filled me with an unbearable sense of frustration, and I couldn't help but question Mr. Smith. "Mr. Smith, I'm fully aware that I haven't performed perfectly. I apologize. However, I have always worked diligently for this company. Isn't a sudden dismissal too harsh? Could you at least explain the reason?" Cutting off my plea, Mr. Smith said, "Hold on, James. It seems you're misunderstanding something. I wasn't talking about firing you." "What?" I exclaimed in surprise at Mr. Smith's unexpected response. "James, you're a treasure to our company. Firing you would be a loss for us. I was talking about firing Michael. You, Michael." At Mr. Smith's words, Michael was taken aback. "What are you saying, Mr. Smith? Why would you fire me, the manager, instead of this incompetent supervisor, James?" Even at this point, Michael didn't hold back his disdain for me. "It's quite the opposite. And Michael, why do you think it's only fair for you to be fired? You should know best, don't you? Come in now." Mr. Smith shouted towards the secretary's office. Then, the door to the secretary's office opened, and in came Elizabeth. Seeing her, Michael was the first to react angrily. "The cleaning lady, hey, we're having an important conversation here. Don't just barge in." Despite being yelled at by Michael, Elizabeth retorted, "Old lady, who do you think you're talking to?" With that, Elizabeth removed her mask and hat, which she never took off in public. Upon seeing her face, I couldn't help but exclaim, "Ah!" It was definitely a face I recognized. "It's you, the lady who dropped her wallet on the train that time." When I tentatively asked, Elizabeth smiled warmly and replied, "Yes, thank you so much for that time. Thanks to you, I didn't lose my important cash, cards, and driver's license. You're my savior." To think that the elegant elderly lady I encountered that time was the cleaning staff I chatted with every day. Seeing my speechless surprise, Mr. Smith added with a smile, "Indeed, James, I also want to thank you for returning my mother's wallet. Though belated, I appreciate it." It seemed Michael was the most shocked by Mr. Smith's words. "My mother? Wait, is this lady really your mother?" As Michael's face turned pale with shock, Mr. Smith reprimanded him sharply. "Watch your mouth, Michael. You've been slandering someone's mother by calling her an old lady. It's because of your twisted personality that you're utterly unfit for our company." Michael, scolded by Mr. Smith, began to tremble with fear, his face turning even paler. After giving Michael a disdainful glance, Elizabeth began to explain the situation. The details were as follows. The mother, wanting to contribute to her son's company in some way, decided to utilize her cleaning skills and began working as a cleaner. While working as a cleaner, she observed the office staff and their characters. During this time, Elizabeth was drawn to my work ethic and character. After the incident with the wallet, she had even suggested to her son that my promotion and performance evaluation be reconsidered. Moreover, Elizabeth had been keeping an eye on Michael's tyrannical behavior and had reported everything, including the truth about the negotiation documents, to Mr. Smith. That was the essence of it. During Elizabeth's explanation, Michael's trembling grew worse, and he eventually collapsed to his knees on the floor, completely overwhelmed. This was truly a sight of utter defeat. Looking down at the pitiful sight of Michael, Mr. Smith said calmly, "Michael, you are truly despicable. Today, you are being dismissed for disciplinary reasons, but before that, apologize to James for all the trouble you've caused him, if you have any shred of conscience left as a human being." Michael, crouching on the floor and holding his head, weakly looked up and said, "James, I'm sorry for all the mean things I've done." Watching Michael break down and sob, I felt a profound sense of pity. In the end, Michael's wrongdoings were brought to light, and the board of directors unanimously decided to dismiss him for disciplinary reasons. Michael left T-Tech, but his followers remained in the company. Ironically, the very next day, those who were part of Michael's faction came to me one after the other, apologizing for their past rudeness and insults. Following these events, I was promoted to the head of the system development department in the next personnel change. Thus, peace returned to the department. The lesson from this entire experience was that those who extend a helping hand to others in need will find others willing to help them in their own times of need. Elizabeth repaid the favor of me returning her wallet with the significant act of saving crucial documents for a business deal. It was a true realization of the saying, "Kindness begets kindness." Half a year has passed since then. As the new department head, I continue to have a good relationship with Elizabeth, Mr. Smith's mother, who still works as a cleaner from time to time, and we often enjoy chatting together as a break from work. Now, with trustworthy subordinates and favored by Mr. Smith, I lead a smooth and successful life, a stark contrast to the unfortunate first half of my life.